with the handling of a globalist Queen's speech by Boris Johnson's government and the repeated liberal attacks on the British right, one can consider a black pill moment in the inner Anglo right-wing sphere, but a light which was growing from within has grown into a small flame. This flame is the Conservative Common Sense Group, with its quote conservative thinking for post-liberal age. The faction/group was created by the Right Honourable John Hayes, MP of South Holland and the Deepings. Mr. Hayes is one of those Tory MPs who lights the hope of a better Conservative Party, with himself expressing views that do align with myself and other ardent anti-Enlightenment traditionalists. He is a social conservative, economic protectionist, communitarian, and Eurosceptic, which are views which anyone should get behind with and follow, but that is not the topic of today of his record. The topic of today is the Common Sense Group and my overall thoughts on it. On the 9th of November 2020, the Daily Telegraph had a special report that the Common Sense Group was to be formed by 59 Conservative MPs to speak for the silent majority of voters tired of being patronised by the elitist bourgeois liberals whenever issues such as immigration or law and order are raised. They went on stating, "Part of our mission is to ensure that institutional custodians of history and heritage, tasked with safeguarding and celebrating British values, are not coloured by cultural Marxist dogma, colloquially known as woke agenda, and that history must neither be sanitized nor rewritten to suit snowflake preoccupations. A clique of powerful privileged liberals must not be allowed to rewrite our history in their image." Although I agree with the sentiment at hand, although some might say boomer conservative, I do see precautions for this, that this could just feel like the Cornerstone faction. Not to act like a person who personifies NRX here and be defeatist, but the last right-wing group we had was the Cornerstone faction, and at best it was a BTEC Monday club, and I just simply can't see as well the Common Sense Group pushing our wants and needs and vote against the government when morality is on the line. If the faction can play a main part on pro-religious and socially conservative legislation, if the Common Sense Group publicly oppose the government's left-wing antics and at least open talks with the government when they think something is not up to traditional par, something along those lines, I can see it as a worthwhile Monday club. But I just can't see the Common Sense Group staying strong without any evidence of it. But I hope they stick to their word. We have seen multiple times of Tory right-wing factions fall due to the lack of stress of Christianity and a push for liberal economics, aka John Redwood and his Thatcherite tendencies. And I think if this was truly to succeed, we need to push for a pro-British agenda and go against the current framework of this government, which it seems like it's going for, but in a way it still tries to appease pragmatically on an economic sense. Currently, the Common Sense Group are taking small steps to succeed and influence the party, copying these sorts of steps of the German Conservative Revolution did. The German Conservative Revolution influenced and changed modern European conservatism. The party Conservative Revolution largely influenced the European New Right. If the Common Sense Group were to influence the Conservatives and the censures like the Conservative Revolution in Germany. An Anglo Conservative Revolution would definitely take place, and it would heavily influence academia. Like a certain other British Conservative Revolution of Thatcher. If this revolution, or renaissance of sorts, would focus on the Christian faith, a better economic model for the right, the enhancement of classical arts and culture vows, this movement could possibly save Britain. But some could say I'm jumping the gun too quickly with the common sense group and white pilling. Same could be said of my negative outlook on modern right-wing factions and its varying failures. The Common Sense Group recently published their Zeitgeist, and it comprised of a preface and few dictations. The preface given by on board John Hayes was in the fashion of the Monday Club, in that they stand for authentic conservatism. Like I said earlier, I do have optimism and doubt when it comes to right-wing factions in the Conservative Party, and I generally would support these right-wing factions. However, they tend to lack a Eucharist viewpoint and different economic solutions for Britain, which would in turn not start this conservative revolution which the Common Sense Group want. Whatever be the outcome of this Common Sense Group, whether it be great or lackluster, I think one thing remains from this preface is that it quite opens the idea of a pro-enlightenment agenda, and what I'm sensing from other chapters is that it emphasizes the concept of liberty and the ideas of democracy. One thing I will get straight: I do not believe the right or conservatism in general support the Republican ideas of liberty. Before you rinse me in the comments and calling me an NRX fanatic or a communist fed, I do believe all men possess a natural pride, constituted primarily by the free exercise of his reason and will. I also both agree that no one should violate this basic human liberty, not even in order to oppose what is true or good. However, I disagree with the modern use of liberty, in that human morality is the supreme leader of good and evil for each individual. Thus, everybody can act as his individual desires want, except in the case where this action would endanger the rights of someone else. Now, you see where I'm going. The Common Sense Group, if they were to take power, and if they impose their ideas of fully emphasizing democracy as the number one system for politics, and liberty if they were the number one matter to man, I do feel like the Conservative Party would go forward in secularization and liberalism. Yes, you could point out that the social conservative ideas in the Common Sense Group are based. However, do we want American frame view? Do we want the Republican Party in America to be the Conservative Party? I surely don't want to, and if they were to revise their position and reframe it into a constitutional monarchy like John Hayes espoused, I think it would benefit the UK and reassure us. With the mini essays and the dictations from Common Sense Group MPs, they touched a wide variety of topics. Some of them I really enjoyed and some of them I didn't enjoy. So I'll be touching on 4 essays, them being Gareth Bacon, What is Wokeism? How can it be defeated? Nick Fletcher, Immigration and the Working Class. Alexander Stafford, Social Conservatism, Turning the Red Wall Blue for Years to Come. Fiona Bruce, Family Matters, The Case for Strengthening Families. Mr. Bacon starts off his statement with the clear terms that Britain in de facto means is in the process of wrecking itself by the destruction of philosophy, ideology, and the British way of life. Gareth goes further with the explanation of the watered-down teachings and illustrations of key British figures. He blames the woke ideology for the left-wing sentiment and anti-Britishness, anti-Western ideas, and the anti-capitalist rhetoric which our national institutions and organizations have accepted. He points out wokeism is an ideology and that the parties who have expressed the sort wokeism failed dramatically in the 2019 UK general election. The arguments of the Conservatives being not woke is really something comical. As repeated, the Conservatives have been woke and played the boomerang card of deflection and tried to make liberal amends to pander to the youth vote. For example, when the Tory Manifesto had a quote from MP Kemi Badenoch of her stating she joined the party of opportunity, inclusivity and hope, clearly not to be the brains of the brawns here, but that is a strong sort of dog whistle for woke intersectionality fanatics. But I generally agree with the other issues he states, that in an ideology you need an end goal, and that the end aim of that action leads to the tangible goal. But the idea of wokeism does not have an end goal, rather a desire to push against the established British culture norms in the case of nihilism. The essay itself generally touches on the basic ideas of wokeism, of rewriting history to its standards and its tactics of belittling the opposition at any means, the notion itself surrounding identity politics and intersectionality. One key point which I was surprised which Mr. Bacon touched on, and what I have been saying for ages, is the fact that woke activists and its followers use their set of tactics to deceit and to organize and use language as their means of rewriting culture and our institutions. This very links with the topic which I always like to critique about, is the Gay Manifesto of 1990, made by Marshall Kirk and his friends on how to get support and change the air for the worse. An example of this could be the idea that the left tried to create the left-wing moral objective superiority based on the baseless left-wing doctrine. Although it finishes with the basic talking points of wokeism, British institutions, including our national broadcasters, publishers, organizations, fallen prey to woke theory, and that the strong tribalism of going against the culture is their way of silencing the enemy. The Common Sense Group suggests to fix this by amendments to the 2010 Equality Act, as will new laws guaranteeing the freedom of speech. They also state government-funded institutions should be required to promote British values, tradition and history. Now, do I find this practical? Well, yes, to an extent. The Equality Act of 2010 is a sham and a very left-wing coup of how we perceive law, which we ought to remove it and model it off a right-wing basis. And I certainly agree that taxpayer government institutions should be the foundation of promoting what Britain really represents. However, is this enough to fight back wokeism? It is up to hypotheticals from here though, but I think this won't be enough, especially with the online law and the youth mentality. And I think one thing the Common Sense Group can do here is start a new social and economic institutions, things that affect people the most. For example, the Mondragon Corporation. The manufacturing cooperative was set up by priests to embody Catholic social teaching. Institutions like these not only reflect our values but also support its workers and local community, moving it in our direction, which is key to fight back the realities of wokeism. While I do find some of the ideas presented with Gareth Bacon incorrect, I certainly do believe this was a good essay, and the overall criticisms I have of this in general will be shared later on. Rather than Mr. Fletcher's essay be on principle of sorts, Mr. Fletcher has given us a story based on his experience of the fear of the working man. Let me set the scene. Mr. Fletcher is canvassing in his seat of Dun Valley in the 2019 UK general election, with in mind the average working class northern voter voting to stop Jeremy Corbyn as he failed to live up to the standards and not promised a Brexit. You can see how Corbyn failed to juggle correctly with the working class northerner against the urban hip Londoner. Totally separate lives into the ordinary working man and woman, Corbyn went to the South agenda as he failed to recognise the importance of northern culture and community and the working man in the north. As Brexit was the big issue in Don Valley, with Labour not offering a Brexit, it showed the difference between the working man and the current left. So Mr. Fletcher finalises the context before the story by stating, of course people voted for Brexit for many different reasons, yet I am in no doubt that immigration and the vast explosion of it after 2004 made our vote to leave the European Union an inevitability. When Mr. Fletcher was on the campaign trail, when a constituent of his told him his neighbourhood used to be filled with British families, and his 6-year-old daughter once played with his neighbour's children, yet after his direct neighbours left, and the landlord bought the house next to him, the new house's occupants were several men from Eastern Europe who spoke no English. It would be an inherent concern for his family, as he tried to explain it, yet he also felt it necessary to explain, I am not racist though, Nick. I am not racist. A fear and strong blind feeling for many of the working class, being branded as unintelligent and not compatible with the modern sentiment. This is clear and a blatant excuse. The working class's legitimate concerns over immigration must be reassured that neighbourhoods and communities will not be treated as a so-called dumping ground for anyone and everyone who wishes to come to England and not obey our customs, laws, language, culture and beliefs. The whole immigration debate is a hard one, to say the least, and if you've watched my videos, you would know my firm stance and how I strongly disapprove of immigration to favour British citizens and this nation. Also, to touch on a direct topic of this, to brandish things as phobias like Islamophobia or homophobia isn't right. People do have concerns about foreign religions, organizations, movements. Instead of branding them, why not rationally indulge in a conversation of the situation and do something to clarify the situation? Because people do have frightened and concerns, and if you were so woke and open, you'd be open to a little dialogue. It's a shame how the left want more and they want less from within, and how they've weaponized racism. This is why, in one of my videos, I state I sympathize with people who associate with themselves with the BNP and the far right, in that I don't agree with their opinions, but I can agree that their voice for far too long have been silenced by the elite, and no one has ever given them a voice. They are well-meaning and rightfully outraged about the position of this nation, and they're rightfully so. But leaders like Colette Fuentes and all them lot, they aren't right. And I believe that if we can help people before they reach that stage of black pill far right, I certainly believe that the common sense group would have a meaning. Mr. Stafford bluntly and correctly states that the Red Wall has been abandoned by the out-of-touch London elites of the Labour Party. Same could be applied with the Tories as well. But the context is that the North was abandoned by the Labour Party and that the Tories are making amends of sorts. This amends of sorts is the idea of levelling up areas which have been deprived from years, especially the Red Wall, an area being one of them. This is further with the ever so growing distrust of state of politics, the thousands of cuts in the budget, which the effects have been felt by the working man as they see broken promises, uncontested immigration, and the untenable pressures on hospitals and schools. One major idea which many politicians don't recognize is the fact that, yes, Red Wall communities may be left behind economically, as evidenced by Labour's unsustainable and number one city for England, aka London. But certainly the northern talent, work ethic, and enthusiasm for traditional values are there. Voters in the Red Wall linked the moral decline in urban areas with a lack of emphasis on these British values and to corrosive political correctness. Which is reassuring is that they don't hold paleo-libertarian views in that they regard our famous establishments as something which we need to value, and not something populist like to throw away the BBC. They are not anti-establishment, contrary to belief. They are defenders of the armed forces, the royal family, the House of Lords, etc. But they recognize that the left-wing influence needs to be rooted out, like I stated earlier.
The Red Wall has been undervalued for too long, and it is the government that need to invest and bring prosperity. But they don't give any means or ways of how they would bring this, and I fear with a wrong frame view, which we always see with conservative groups, will drag us down, especially if we are to protect the North with certain Thatcher economics. To get to the main point of Mr. Stafford is that he tried to convince the reader that the Conservative Party was the party of economic equality and communitarianism. I am a sort of fan of communitarianism, and whether you agree or disagree with the Conservatives being the party of economic liberalism and communitarianism, forcing the idea of equality as the backbone of the Tories to win in a social conservative climate won't be great in the long run, especially if you count in Robert Conquest's law.
Stafford finalizes, in his words, stating we must double down on the social conservatism that voters in our constituencies expect of us. And as we discussed, due to the mentality and I say the wisdom of the North, if the common sense group put forward a mandate of social conservatism and not talk but do the action, the Conservative Party will be the cornerstone of a blue wall for many years to come. Probably the most realistic and eye-catching with its figures and its statements, it starts with a blast stating family values is more than the Conservative Party, and that it is essential to society, a reason why we have such high family poverty rates, and outcomes of our legislation decreasing family wealth is due to the fact we don't take family policy seriously. They break down their essay with three main sections that firstly you need healthy societies in order to have strong families. Secondly, you need to embody families to level up communities. Lastly, we need to champion families by helping them with better tax and benefit systems. With British society, especially when it comes to family ideals, COVID has given us the worst of it by the divorce and separation increasing between parents and their offsprings, and growing loneliness among older people, such that around 250,000 people aged over 75 spent Christmas Day alone, even before COVID-19 restrictions. The breakdown of the family unit has caused misery and despair among the community. It is in our interest, and what the common sense group espouse is to reteach what obligation, sacrifice, loyalty, and compassion means. One critique I must add is that they call solidarity left wing. As a follower of Catholic social teaching, I can fundamentally disagree with this connotation of it being left wing, as it's neither left wing or right wing, it's above. The Conservatives, as they try to solidify their points in red wall seats, they have naturally pushed for community action, as it is no surprise that in red wall seats, that community dislocation, loss of belongings, and the rising rates of both poverty and crimes is a phenomenon, and those are family breakers and deterrents. So the Conservatives frame it like this: family breakdown is a driver of poverty, whilst children raised in strong families are themselves more likely to enjoy family stability later in life. So to fix it, where the problem hits, is that you need to address and amend social infrastructure to build back better. Her final point was that our tax system heavily focuses and favors on the independent person, and by this is very individualistic and does not recognize family responsibility in any way, as it puts more in the individual than your average family. She does recognize government support with the reintroduction of the family tax allowance, but it was just not enough, and it was more of a soundbite than action case. She does give us reasons to amend our system, but not give us sound reform solutions, though, as it states by her, to void the trap of previous governments where families remained everyone's concern, but nobody's responsibility. Let us take up our responsibility as one nation government to fulfill our manifesto commitment to strengthen families and strengthen society. Although not a sound manifesto, it reinforces the idea that the common sense group are willing to be a grass-rooted community society and grow from where it matters, the local people. I am genuinely happy and looking forward for greater times ahead. However, framing the rule of law, democracy, human rights, liberty, freedom, free market capitalism as the number one issue of the right and northern conservatism, I don't think it's right. And what worries me the most is that when the common sense group frame themselves like this, they don't seem conservative themselves, and they will look like they failed their own faction objectives. But the one thing which did grind my gears was the emphasis of American conservative free market capitalism, and I will make a full video on that on a later date and why it's not compatible and the correct answer for the right. So God bless you all. It's Right Honourable Limbo.